Hi everybody. Today is part one of a series that we're going to do on working around distractions and getting your dog to focus on you in different environments and around distractions and things like that. So today we're going to go over a handful of things, and then we're going to be diving into each of those things deeper in the next group of lives. So you'll see what I mean here in a minute. So today, like I said, we're going to start talking about working around distractions in general. So when I was listening to an interview with Dr. Susan Friedman a couple weeks ago, so before last week's live, you guys heard me reference her there as well because she is absolutely one of my favorites. And definitely let me know if you guys can't hear me. I'm in a new location again today. Or if you can hear me, or either way. So one of the things that Susan Friedman said in that last interview that I was listening to her speak, she said that her and Hannah Brannigan were talking about working around distraction, working in different environments. So I have notes today because I don't want to forget things. And that podcast is Drinking from the Toilets, Hannah Brannigan's podcast on positive reinforcement training, and it's absolutely fantastic. So that's a great resource for you guys. But Susan Friedman said we should never talk about behavior without conditions. Behaviors are always conditional. They never happen in a vacuum. And so I thought that was a great place for us to jump off and start talking about working around distractions, because it really sums up a lot of really important facts. To remember that behaviors are always conditional, they never happen in a vacuum. So what she was talking about when she said that is that it is one thing to say, my dog can sit on cue. We're assume on cue, right? Everyone's dog can sit, but can he do it when you ask? So it is one, if I say my dog can sit, what does that mean? Because behavior doesn't happen in a vacuum. So his ability to respond to the sit cue in my living room is very different than his ability to respond to the sit cue in a crowded shopping center. And so that sit behavior, that cue, that behavior, that reinforcement system, everything that goes along with that behavior, those are all conditional. They happen in certain environments better than they happen in other environments. So one thing that I want people to stop thinking when they go to work in a new location with their dog is, my dog knows this. Well, if you're in a new environment or you're around new distractions, then your dog maybe doesn't know it under these conditions. So just because your dog can sit and offer great eye contact in your living room, of course does not mean he can do that in a crowded shopping center. And that's, of course, what this series of videos we're going to do is about, getting him to the point from, where he can do it in your living room to doing it in a crowded shopping center. But the first part of that is making sure that we kind of expand how we think about working around distractions. Another thing that I have heard Susan Friedman say in a couple of different areas is she'll say, well, how do we know what the dog knows? By what he does. Okay, your dog, if we want to know what he knows, what he understands, then we're just going to see what he does. So if your dog doesn't respond to a sit cue in a crowded environment, then perhaps he does not know how to do a sit in a crowded environment. And so we need to teach him that. So the first step in working around distractions is, I think, getting over this mental hurdle of, but my dog knows it. And I fall into that. I just fell into that just the other day. We were at our cabin, my dad's cabin, for the weekend. And I don't even remember exactly the circumstance. I think I just called one of my dogs. I said to come away from some kind of distraction or something, and she didn't do it. And my first thought was, but she knows this. She knows how to come when called. Well, if she knew how to come when called under that specific set of conditions, then she would have done it. And so I do it. We all do it. But this first, getting over that mental hurdle, is really important. So stop thinking about it as, my dog knows how to sit, and so now I'm working around distractions. Remember that you have to almost reteach that behavior around distractions. So first we're going to get over that mental hurdle, and we're going to understand that behaviors are conditional. They happen differently under different conditions. They never happen in a vacuum. So how your dog feels that day, whether he's sick, whether he's happy, that matters. The environment, the distractions, that matters. Your attitude matters. So I have a dog in my house who, if I am stressed and tense, he does not listen very well because he gets stressed and tense, and he just cannot respond to cues when he knows I'm angry. So some dogs are very sensitive in that way. So once we get over the mental hurdle, okay, then we start to talk about what we were talking about last week. So first we need to define what we want from our dogs around distractions. So when we work with our service dogs, we think about working around distractions as 3 separate pieces, and when we get them all together, that's when we get our really great understanding. So we think about it like this. I think it's going to be backwards now that I think about this. That's okay. I will. There's going to be an ebook ready for you guys next week that will have this in here, but you'll get the idea, the little chart. So up here, this says focus on you, self-control, and calmness around distractions. Okay, and it's only when you get all 3 of those things that you get a dog that can actually listen to you in different environments. So we have the focus on you component, which is just a part of it, but we also need a dog who has self-control, and we need a dog who can remain calm around distractions. So we like to work on these 3 things as 3 separate components. And we're going to dig into each of these 3 things separately over the next few lives. So really quickly, this is how we think about focus for our dogs. And then we have definitions for all of these. So I don't want to say my dog focuses on me around distractions. Okay, that's important, yes, but what does that look like? So for our dogs, we don't mind when we're in public if they're looking around and paying attention to other things, as long as they're calm and self-controlled, and they're attentive to us whenever we ask for it. So what does that look like? What does an attentive dog look like? That's the next thing we need to define. We need to define what does a calm dog look like. And then we need to define what self-control is. And so we're going to get into each of those things over the next few lives. So like next week, we're going to talk about calmness around distractions and how to teach your dog to be calm. Because if your dog isn't calm around distractions, you're really going to have a hard time getting him to listen to you. So over-arousal is a huge problem. You know, dogs who see another dog and they start to bark and lunge. Dogs who hear a sound and they start barking. Or, you know, I mean, we've worked with dogs like that. We have service dogs in our program who have gone through those phases where they were very easily overly aroused in public. But those are all things we need to define, and we need to make sure that we're all on the same page on what those mean. So we're going to get into that in the next few weeks. So what I also wanted to talk about today is this is where my notes come in so I don't forget things, is that there are kind of 3 things professional trainers do to help their dogs be successful around distractions and in their training sessions to create dogs who can focus around distractions. There are kind of 3 things that we as professional trainers do that you need to learn to do as well if you're going to train your own service dog. So one of them is you need to have a solid reinforcement strategy. And we're going to get into each of these deeper as we go through the three sections in here. So next week there will be an ebook for you, which I just didn't have time for done in time for today. So that will come out next week, but that will be a free ebook on this stuff. And we're going to go through each of these in more detail. But you need to have a solid reinforcement strategy. So if you don't think about this ahead of time, you're going to be more likely to fail. So your reinforcement strategy includes what kind of treats are you going to use? How are you going to deliver the reinforcement? How are you going to be interesting for your dogs? A huge part of having a solid reinforcement strategy is making sure that you remain interesting, even though you're in an interesting environment. So dogs follow the reinforcement. If your dog gets more reinforcement from the environment than he gets from you, of course he's going to focus on the environment instead of you when you're out in public. And so your reinforcement strategy is huge. So that comes down to things like the value of treats you're using. So when we're in our training building, in our facility, our dogs only get dog food. They don't get anything better than that because there's nothing going on. Now, if we bring them to a group class that's being held in our facility, then we're going to pull out, pepperoni or Sojos or the mosquitoes finally found me. Or we're going to pull out hot dogs or chicken, something that's going to help keep their attention if we're in a crowded room with lots of other people and lots of other dogs. Now, if we go to the mall, we're also going to bring better treats with us because if I have, a distraction, so one of our dogs, Bruno, for example, he's very social, and so we're working on listening around strangers because he wants to go say hello to everybody. So if a stranger is like a level 10 reinforcement, a level 10 distraction, then I really can't bring out my dog food, which is like a level 4, and expect it to work. Okay, that would be like me saying to you, hey, if you ignore that $1 million worth of cash on the ground, I'll give you a $10 bill. Why would you do that? That's a really bad deal. Dogs know a good deal when they see one, and they know a bad deal. So you want to think about the value level of the reinforcement that you're bringing with you. So good treats should be for harder environments, and less good treats. You know what I mean? You want to pair them with your environment. So your reinforcement strategy includes what types of treats are you using. It also includes how you're going to give the reinforcement. So if you give your dog a treat and you just go, good boy, and you just really calmly hand it to your dog, that could be good if we're working on calmness, because you're encouraging calmness, but it doesn't encourage really focus on you if there are other exciting things going on. So you might look into, for example, I was working with Amelia, and she was in Home Depot, and we were having trouble figuring out why she'd be happy one moment and scared the next. And we finally figured out that it had to do with whenever the aisle got tight, whenever they had like pallets of things in the aisles, her whole body would kind of shut down. She'd get really nervous. So what we did was I would ask for a behavior, click, and then we would run, and when she caught me, she would get the treat. So adding in the movement made it more exciting, it made it more playful, and it made it possible for her to be successful in that environment. That's just one way that you can use a reinforcement strategy. Now, I know a lot of people will go, well, I can't just run around in public. Well, you can if you choose your locations correctly. Now, I'm not suggesting that you run down, the China aisle at, some fancy store near you, okay? I'm recommending that you do that in the maybe, a quiet corner of Walmart. You click and then run a few feet and give your dog a treat. So, of course, take into consideration where you are when you make your reinforcement strategy. So, for example, a tennis ball would be a great reinforcement for a lot of our dogs. They love playing fetch. They love that. It's like one of their favorite games. If we could bring a tennis ball to the mall, that would make our lives a lot easier. But I really can't play fetch in the mall with my service dog. So you want to think about your reinforcement strategy, and we're going to get into that more when we talk about the focus on you bubble in our little diagram. So the second thing that professional trainers do that you need to do is you need to control and manipulate your dog's distance from the distraction and the intensity of the distraction as two separate things. So what professional trainers do is we are very careful to set up training sessions where we can manipulate the intensity level of the distraction and the distance from the distraction as two separate components, and then we bring them together only when our dog is ready. So, for example, I'm sitting at a park right now. There aren't any kids out here, but if there were 10 kids running around on the playground just off camera, then if I needed my dog to be successful in this environment, parks are great to bring your dog to work around distractions, especially if the problem is that they're too social. But we would start way down here, because if there are 10 kids running around, the intensity of that distraction is much harder than if there was just one person sitting calmly on a bench, right? So if the intensity level of the distraction is high, we're going to stay farther away from the distraction and slowly move closer. If the intensity level of the distraction is low, so there's one person sitting on the bench over there, then we might work a lot more close. We might work more close to the distraction. And only when our dogs are being successful regularly will we put those two things together. So I see a lot of owner trainers accidentally, of course, throw their dogs into the deep end and kind of go sink or swim, and then their dogs sink, and then they kind of wonder why. Well, it's because you can't just take a new dog to an intense distraction, environment and work them really close. So I have videos last week, I told you Bruno is having trouble working around people because he's so excited to see them. So last week we went to Walmart and we started far away from the entrance so that as people were walking in and out, we could train him while people were walking in and out of the entryway, but we started far away and slowly worked closer only as he was being successful. And I do have that on video, so maybe I will post a bit of that for you guys. So control and manipulate the intensity level of the distraction and the distance that you work from the distraction, okay? So then the third thing that professional trainers do that you should do as well is, let me just read this one really quick. We want to create training sessions where you can control the distractions and do everything in your power to avoid being around distractions that your dog cannot handle yet. So that goes, again, if you notice, there's planning here. So we want to plan a reinforcement strategy. We want to plan our distance and the intensity level. And now we want to plan training sessions where, we can control the distractions enough that our dogs aren't going to sink, that we're not saying sink or swim, good luck, buddy. So when we do this, then this goes back to actually kind of jump the gun. What I was saying just a minute ago is we see a lot of really well-meaning owner trainers bring their dogs into situations they are simply not ready for. Their dogs just simply cannot handle. So one of the things we see a lot is people bringing their dogs to Walmart when they actually have to go grocery shopping or something like that. But when you're actually grocery shopping, your attention is split between you and your dog, between your dog and what you're doing. And a lot of young green dogs are just not going to be able to handle that. They need 100% of your attention, or they're not going to be able to be successful. So you want to keep your training sessions short. You want to go to places that you know your dog will be more likely to be successful at. So Friday evening at our mall here is chaotic. So we do not take our dogs to the mall and Friday evenings until we know they can handle it. We start with the mall on like a Monday morning when there's nobody in there, and then we slowly work into it. The last thing you want to do is put yourself in a situation that your dog might not be able to handle, in which you can't control the distractions, and in which you have no exit strategy. So you don't want to bring your dog to like a movie, for example, if you're not willing to leave the movie if your dog starts to struggle. Because the longer your dog struggles in that environment, the more you're just building a habit of not paying attention or being distracted or being overly aroused or whatever the problem is. So there's a lot of planning that goes into working around distractions, but that is the best way to be successful. So we are going to, like I said, that is it for today. Let's do a recap, but we're going to get into all this stuff over the next few lives individually. So remember, when we're talking about distractions, we're talking about focusing on the ability to focus on you as one piece of it. But we also need a dog who can be calm around distractions and a dog who can show self-control around distractions. And those are three separate things. And if you're missing one of these, you're probably going to struggle. Okay? And we're going to jump into each of these over the next few lives individually so that I can show you how we do this. But remember, there's lots of planning for that goes into this. You need to have a solid reinforcement strategy. You need to understand how to control and manipulate the intensity level and the distance from your distraction. And do not throw your dog into the deep end. Always have an exit strategy. Set up training situations in which you can control the distractions. And we'll move into it from there. Because, so we already talked about at the beginning, Susan Friedman, we should never talk about behavior without conditions. Behaviors are always conditional. They never happen in a vacuum. So when you're talking about a behavior, when you go into this and start to define what does focus mean to you, we need to define that with conditions attached to it. Okay, so if I want my dog to sit, then sitting in the living room is very different from sitting at the mall. So we always want to think about our behaviors with conditions associated with it. So I saw that I had some comments. I just want to make sure nobody had questions before I jump off here. Okay, no, you guys didn't have questions. You have very good comments, though. Patience training really does take a lot of patience and flexibility, and that is that is hard. That is one of the reasons that this is something that there is an industry for professional trainers to do, because training a service dog is hard. I am not going to lie to you guys. But it is definitely doable if you pull it into its tiny little pieces, you break it apart, and work on those pieces separately. So yes, please post Bruno's video. So I will look at it again, and I will see if it is as good as I think it is. And if it's not, then I will create a video to show you guys. But that is it for today. So next week, we're going to start by talking about calmness around distractions. That's going to be the first thing we jump into, so that we can start talking about how to get your dog to be calm in the presence of distractions. So think about what distractions for your dog make him too excited or unable to focus, and we're going to start chipping away at them. So I will see you guys next week. If you have any questions, throw them in the comments, even if you're watching the replay, because we're happy to answer them. And if you liked this video or found it helpful, make sure to like it and share it anywhere that owner trainers might find it helpful, because that is the best way for us to help people, is if you share it. Because we really do want to help this information get to as many people as possible. So we will see you guys next week, and let us know if you have any questions.